Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 17. John's POV. It was that time of day when the guards allowed us inmates to mingle on the block. All the cells were left open for 2 hours, giving us a chance to stretch our legs, talk, or make new friends. I would have preferred to go out into the yard, but at this point, any time spent out of my cell felt like a blessing. Ironically, I found myself not in my own cell but in Nathan's, sitting at a small table with him, Riley, and Kyle, playing a card game Kyle had invented. I leaned back in my chair, balancing on 2 legs, and stifled a yawn. We'd been at it for about 15 minutes already, and I was ready to throw in my cards and find another way to pass the time. On the bottom bunk, Nathan and Riley sat shoulder to shoulder, exchanging shy smiles. Beside me, Kyle kept craning his neck to peek at my cards. I sighed. This was my life now, wasting time in prison while the real bad guys got away. After 2 years of this undercover work, I had to wonder if this was still what I wanted. I wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed waiting around. I wanted action, wanted to make a difference. And when my time in here was up, that's what I'd be doing. Nathan, though, was in this for life. Sure, he talked about leaving one day, maybe starting a security company, but this world was in his blood. I respected that. Everyone had their calling. Riley, on the other hand, was clearly attached. Anyone could see it, the way he hung on Nate's every word, how his eyes always found Nathan's face, how he pouted whenever Nate had to go check in with a visitor. It reminded me of the way Kyle had been looking at me, and my eyes narrowed as I turned to catch him staring again. He jerked back quickly, but it was obvious to everyone he'd been cheating. I tossed my cards face up on the table, and the others followed suit, probably relieved the game was over. I rolled my shoulders, trying to shake off the discomfort. Kyle's growing attachment wasn't something I could handle right now, not something I wanted to handle. "We should double date sometime," Kyle announced, breaking the silence. I looked at him like he'd just grown horns. "Don't look at me like that," he said. "I know you and Riley are a thing and John and I are pretty close too. It'd be cool for us to hang out when we get out of here. Maybe a movie or dinner at some fancy place. My dad knows a few. Or an amusement park, though actually, I'm kind of scared of rides." I finally spoke up. "What do you mean we're close? I barely know you." He raised an eyebrow. "You know me well enough." He turned back to the others. Nathan shrugged. "I think it's kind of sweet you two are close," Kyle continued, as if he couldn't survive without talking. "We're not a couple. We're just cellmates," Riley said, though the blush on his face betrayed his words. "Aha," Kyle said. "You two should stop denying your feelings. Be more like me and Nate. We embrace our emotions." "We're just cellmates." "You're overthinking it," Nathan said in a bored tone. He stood up and stepped past Kyle toward the door. "Coming?" he asked Riley, who got up immediately to follow. Then it was just me and Kyle. "Was it something I said?" Kyle asked, frowning. I sighed. Of all the people in the world, why did he have to get attached to me? So, then I told him there was no way I was taking the bottom bunk, and he told me off like I wasn't the first one there. Can you believe it? I cracked an eye open, wondering if he really expected me to answer. But he was too busy tidying up the small cell, folding Eddie's pants and lining up shoes. And then I went to the guard to complain, and he brushed me off too. "This place is just full of jerks," he went on. My eyes drifted closed again, but his chatter had a strangely calming effect. We'd left Nate's cell after he and Riley departed, and I'd come back to mine, too tired to hang out anymore. Not surprisingly, Kyle had followed me. "We should request a cellmate transfer," he said now. "Then we could room together." "I like my cellmate," I answered without looking at him. "Well, I hate mine. What if I told you he hurt me? Would you transfer then?" I raised my brows. "Your cellmate's an old guy who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag." He sighed. "But he snores." I snore. "Well, he's grumpy." "So am I." "Yeah, but you're a good kind of grumpy." You actually listen when I talk." He came to sit beside me on the bunk, one foot bent under him, the other hanging off the side. "There's no good side to Grumpy, Kyle." I chuckled despite myself. He pouted, somehow managing to look endearing. "Well, he smells. And you're easy to talk to. Imagine if we roomed together, we could stay up late, talk, get to know each other better." Which, honestly, was a good reason to pass on the whole transfer idea. And maybe do other things. He flashed me a mischievous smile. I shifted slightly away from him, and he scooted closer. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" I asked. "I'm staying until time's up." "You know nothing will come of this, right? You're wasting your time," I said seriously. "You're only making this harder than it needs to be," he said firmly. "We're meant to be together. I just know it. I don't date criminals." He blinked at me. "Neither do I." I resisted the urge to shake him until he understood. "We're just two misunderstood guys who got caught, right?" he continued with a grin. Despite myself, I almost smiled back. The kid could spin anything to his advantage. "Who says you're even my type?" "Well, if my hunch about you is right," his grin faded as he looked into my eyes. And in his, I saw the same longing-eyed scene in Riley's when he looked at Nate. I turned away, unsure how to handle the moment. "I can make you happy, John," he said softly, determination in his voice. I looked back at him, his steady gaze holding mine, and swallowed hard against the warmth rising in my chest. "Can I kiss you?" I was surprised he even bothered to ask. I shook my head slowly, not quite confident in my response. He smiled. "One day you'll be begging me for a kiss." "Since when did you get so cocky?" I ground out, and his grin widened. "When it comes to you, I can afford to be." He ran his hand over my shaved head. "Why'd you shave it?" I asked. I shrugged. He yawned. "Scoot over, Johnny." He pushed gently at my side. "The name's John," I corrected as I moved to make room. A second later he was stretched out beside me, his head tucked under my only pillow. I couldn't deny how comforting it was to have a warm body beside mine. I waited until his breathing evened and he fell into a deep sleep before I climbed down from the bunk. I glanced back at him as I laced my boots, then slipped out into the corridor. I passed several cells. Most were empty. If you had a chance to leave the sardine, you took it. A minute later I stepped into the last cell on the block, where the rest of our crew was holed up. Nate and Riley were there, and the room was nearly full, so I leaned against the wall and folded my arms, listening as Eddie questioned Riley. "So, you shoved him, he fell, broke his hand, and then you threatened him. What exactly did you say?" Eddie pressed. Riley sighed. Nate put a hand on his shoulder and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "I told you, I said if he went near my mother again, I'd kill him," Riley said. Eddie considered that for a beat. "And you said at least a dozen people witnessed it, right?" Eddie continued. "Yes, Eddie. Why do we have to go over this again? My mom's ex showed up drunk at the party. He pulled me aside and asked where she was. I told him to get lost. He shoved me, I shoved him back, and he fell and broke his arm. I told him off and left. A week later he's dead and I'm arrested for murder. Got it?" Riley's frustration showed. "He's just making sure he has all the facts, Riles," Nate said. I shook my head at the new nickname. Riley rubbed his face. "I know. I'm just tired of repeating it. Just one more question. Are you sure you have no idea how the murder weapon ended up in your house? Are you sure you're not protecting someone, like your mom?" Eddie asked. The room went quiet. "My mom? How'd she get involved? Wait, you think she set me up? Are you serious?" Riley's voice rose. Eddie raised a hand. "You said he was abusing her, right? She came home with bruises. Maybe she'd had enough and did something. Maybe she panicked, took the knife home, and when you were arrested, she stayed quiet because she was scared." Riley shook his head hard. "You don't get it. I might not have liked him, but she was still in love with him. She didn't care that he hurt her, she just wanted him to be happy." His tone was bitter. The situation felt more tangled than any of us liked. And then this kid who was at the party comes forward saying he knows who killed him, and hours later he's dead, someone added. "We need to consider that maybe Jerry didn't do it," Nate said. I talked to him. I can't see him as the culprit. If Nate thought Jerry unlikely, then our leads were dwindling fast. You said he looked scared when he came in, kept looking over his shoulder like someone might see him? Maybe it all ties back to the prison. Maybe he saw someone here and that's why he ran. That would explain the timing. I offered. A few of them nodded. It made a kind of sense. We need someone on the outside to investigate, Nate said. Our hands are tied in here. It won't be simple. The phone lines are monitored and the visiting area is likely wired, Eddie said, running a hand over his face. If we hire an investigator and the perp is here, we'll put him on alert. We'd need to get a note out, maybe slip it to a visitor, but they search us. It's risky. There was, of course, another way, but using our secure line for something unrelated to the operation wasn't an option. Everyone in the room understood that. I hadn't liked Riley when he first joined the crew, but like the others I'd grown protective of him. Knowing he might be left behind when our operation ended felt like a punch to the gut. The kid didn't belong in a place like this. We'll figure it out, I said. Nate nodded and bent to speak quietly to Riley. Thanks, guys. Riley pushed up from his seat and left. We watched Nate expectantly. Any news about the op? He asked, shifting back into business mode. Silence answered him, which was as good as any update. Hey, good. Everything's on track then. We'll meet tomorrow in the yard after I get the update from outside. As for Riley, we need to get him out. Nate's voice hardened. If I have to do it myself, I will. I've never stood by while an innocent suffered, and I'm not about to start. I'll need your help. If anyone has an issue with that, speak now. No one spoke. We were 2 steps behind Nate, always. He nodded, expression heavy, then left the same way Riley had. That's one messed up situation, someone muttered. I left before the conversation could go any further. Back in my cell, Kyle was still sprawled on my bunk, asleep. I took off my boots and dropped into the chair opposite him, tilting it back as far as it would go without tipping. I studied him. He was a troublemaker, too flamboyant, too chatty, nosy, and far too confident for my taste. At the same time, he was kind, a loyal friend to Riley, pleasant to be around when he wasn't talking a mile a minute, and yes, he was attractive. It wasn't that the positives outweighed the negatives, it was the reality of the situation. He was a criminal. I was a man of the law. When this was over, I'd go back to being that man. Nothing could come of this, not now. Maybe in another life, another time, when my work didn't put people in danger, things could be different. But for now, welcoming him into my life would be selfish and irresponsible. Chapter 18. Riley's POV. What do you think they're talking about over there? Kyle tilted his head toward our crew, who had, unsurprisingly, kicked us out of whatever secret meeting they were having. You'd think that after everything we'd been through together, they'd trust us by now. I shrugged. Whatever it is, we're probably better off not knowing. The words came out lightly, but deep down, I didn't believe them. My frown betrayed my thoughts. The rest of the crew sat in a tight circle around a large table not far from where Kyle and I had parked ourselves. Their faces were serious, tense, though maybe there was some excitement there too. I couldn't tell. Isn't Johnny looking handsome this morning? Kyle teased. I glanced over at John. He sat with his elbows on the table, listening intently to whatever Nathan was saying. Same plain prison uniform, same tattoos, same shaved head, same permanently grumpy expression. I rolled my eyes. You're smitten, I teased back. Kyle grinned and raised a brow. And you aren't. At least I'm not sitting here staring at Nathan like you are at John. That's because you get to share a cell with him all night, Kyle shot back, giving me a playful look. Lucky you. I chuckled but sighed softly. Yeah, but in just a few weeks, Nathan will be gone, and I'll have to room with someone else. I could request a transfer to your cell, Kyle offered, eyes bright with excitement. I shook my head. No point. You'll be gone a month after Nate leaves, and then what? I'd rather not get attached to anyone new. Kyle shrugged, his expression softening. The others will look out for you when we're gone. I'll make sure of it. And you know I'll visit. I'll even track Nathan down and drag him along. I couldn't help but smile. That I don't doubt. After a pause, I asked quietly, "How do you do it, Kyle?" "Do what?" "Stay so positive. You're in prison, yet you never act like it." He smirked faintly. "You don't see me when I'm upset at night." Concern flickered through me, but he laughed it off. "I just don't see the point in walking around miserable all day. There's nothing I can do to change where I am." He shrugged again. "You make it sound so easy," I muttered. "Okay, look at it this way. If I hadn't ended up here, I wouldn't have met you, or the others, or John. Everything happens for a reason, Riley." His expression was so sincere it almost convinced me. Still, it sounded simpler than it really was. I found myself wishing I could see things the way he did. "Do you really cry yourself to sleep at night?" I asked. He smiled softly. "At first, I did. But then I met John. It's hard to stay sad with someone like him around." Before I could respond, he stood. "I'm gonna crash their meeting. Come on." I frowned. "You think that's a good idea?" He just shrugged and walked toward the table. I sighed, pushed myself up and followed. The moment we reached the crew, the voices died down. Nathan turned to watch us with an unreadable expression. "Scoot over, Johnny," Kyle said as he forced himself into the space between Eddie and John. I rolled my eyes and took the only other empty seat, directly across from Nathan. "So, Riley was wondering what you guys are always whispering about, so we decided to sit in," Kyle said casually. I shot him a glare. He just looked back innocently. "What happened to respecting people's privacy?" one of the guys muttered. The tension at the table thickened. Nathan gave the speaker a look before turning to me. "It's fine. We were just discussing your case. I didn't want you to worry, which is why I asked you to leave earlier." I stared at him, emotions swirling inside me. "Really? You're just going to sit there and lie to me?" My voice was quiet, but the entire table froze. All eyes shifted toward us. Kyle tried to jump in. "Riley, I'm sure he's telling the truth." "No," I cut him off, eyes still locked on Nathan. "I know him. You don't live with someone as long as I have without noticing things." He just lied to my face. Nathan didn't move. He just sat there, gaze steady, expression unreadable. "You want to have your secret meetings, fine," I said firmly, my voice shaking only slightly. "But don't treat me like I'm clueless. I'd endured too much already." The last thing I needed was Nathan, of all people, lying to me. Kyle spoke up again. "What's so important that you have to hide it? Aren't we part of this crew too? Don't you trust us?" Nathan finally broke his silence. "All right, I lied," he admitted, his voice cool and his jaw tight. "When we keep meetings like this, it's for a reason. And if I say you're not welcome, I mean it. Better." His frosty tone cut deep. I glanced around the table, searching for answers in the others' faces, but they all stayed quiet. I shook my head. "Fine. Go back to your little meeting. I've got better things to do than sit here and be shut out." Before anyone could respond, I stood. Hurt that they still didn't fully trust Kyle and me, angry that Nathan had felt the need to lie, and embarrassed that I'd been dismissed in front of everyone. By him, I walked across the room toward the phones, where a familiar guard stood waiting. The one who had been kind to me. I heard Kyle's footsteps tapping against the floor as he followed. I slowed down so he could catch up. "What now?" he asked once he was at my side. His tone made it clear he wasn't thrilled about the situation either. "Wanna play cards in my cell?" I suggested. His eyes narrowed. "I would, but we're not allowed on the block until they say so." I tilted my head toward a guard standing not far away. Nathan's not the only one with connections around here. A slow smile spread across Kyle's face. "Lead the way." Taking a steadying breath, I walked up to the guard. "Guard Kelly, right?" I asked. Recognition lit his eyes. "You're that quiet kid. Riley, wasn't it?" I smiled shyly. "What can I do for you?" he asked. I know this might sound strange, but I was wondering if it would be possible for me to go back to my cell. I trailed off, realizing I hadn't come up with a solid reason for why he should let us. I looked up at him, waiting hopefully. He frowned, glancing between Kyle and me. "The blocks closed during lunch period," he explained. I glanced helplessly at Kyle, but he just shrugged, offering no help. Why do you want to go back on the block? Kelly pressed. I shrugged again, cheeks heating. Boredom, I admitted softly. Kelly's amused look only deepened my embarrassment. Come with me, he finally said. My eyes widened. Wait, you're really taking us back? He shook his head. Even better. I'll show you something. He signaled to another guard, then motioned for us to walk ahead of him. Kyle looked uneasy, and I bit my lip, silently wondering what exactly I'd just gotten us into. As we passed the room, I caught the crew watching. My eyes locked with Nathan's. His brows were furrowed in what looked like concern as he watched us walk out with Kelly. I quickly turned away, still stung by how he had treated me earlier. Nathan's POV. They're only going to get more suspicious, you know? Eddie said as soon as Kyle was out of earshot. Clearly. But we don't have much of a choice, I replied. Have you thought about what you're going to do about him once we're done here? Eddie asked again. I haven't thought much past the mission. I'll figure it out. Eddie raised a brow, looking at me like I'd spoken in another language. When we leave and the other inmates find out why we were really here, and they will, Riley and Kyle will be in danger. That'll be on us. They're as much part of this crew as the rest of us, and I won't leave them to fend for themselves just because they're connected to us. I bristled. Whether it was the heat of the day or just the tension in the air, everyone seemed determined to challenge me. Being caught in a lie by Riley had already been frustrating enough. Now one of my men was questioning whether I'd protect the very people I cared about. I don't know if you're being deliberately difficult, or if you really don't see it, but I care about Riley. And John cares about Kyle. So, when I say we'll look out for them, I mean it. The weight of my words seemed to quiet everyone. Eddie fell silent, though his expression lingered on me like he wanted to press further. John gave me a wide-eyed look, as if I'd revealed something I shouldn't have. The others kept their eyes down, clearly wary of my temper. I tugged at my collar, trying to let air cool my skin, but it didn't help much. If Riley doesn't get released before we leave, we'll pull some strings and have him transferred. He'll be fine. As for Kyle, he'll be out not long after we're gone. That won't be an issue, John said calmly, stepping into the role of peacemaker. So, what? You two are actually attached to prisoners now? Charlie asked. I shot him a sharp look. He didn't sound judgmental, more curious, but his words still grated. Mind your own business, John snapped before I could speak. I turned away from both of them, tugging at my collar again. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Riley leaving with Kyle and Kelly. My frown deepened. I don't even want to know what those two are up to, John muttered, catching the wink Kyle threw his way. A couple of the guys snickered. Riley's eyes met mine for a brief moment before he looked away. It didn't take a genius to know he was upset. I muttered a curse under my breath, at the situation, at the heat, at the mission, because nothing about today was going the way I wanted. Chapter 19. Are we even allowed up here? Kyle asked in awe as we took in the view. I'd never imagined a place like this would have such a sight. From the small balcony, we could see the entire prison grounds stretched out below us. Beyond the far walls, I could even catch a glimpse of the city, where people roamed free, where I used to walk without a care. Wow, I whispered under my breath, pulling my arms tighter against the biting wind. It's fine, Guard Kelly said, his eyes scanning the balcony. Prisoners come up here to clean anyway. I like coming up here to think, clear my mind. Figured you two could use a place like this sometimes. I blinked at him in disbelief. Wait, you mean we can come here whenever we want? He chuckled. Maybe not whenever you want. But if you're having a bad day, let me know and I'll see what I can do. I frowned softly, still unsure. I just don't get why you're being so nice to me. Even that day in my cell, guards don't usually do that. Like I said, he replied simply, his gaze drifting back to the view, you remind me of my son. Kyle remained quiet, soaking everything in, probably memorizing the moment to hold on to later. Kelly finally asked, so, do you two want to tell me what's going on? Why were you in such a hurry to get back to the block? I shrugged, letting out a heavy sigh. Nothing really. I just wanted to get away from it all for a few minutes. I'm tired of the drama, the secrets, this whole place. Kelly stayed quiet for a while, then placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. If you ever need to talk, don't be a stranger. Either of you. Kyle nodded along with me, accepting the offer. The guys will come around, Kyle added gently. Just give them time. I shook my head. It's been months, Kyle. They'll never change. And really, I don't care about them. But Nathan, my throat tightened, and I swallowed hard against the ache. He just sat there and lied to me. After everything we've been through, after everything we had, it felt like he didn't care at all. Kelly drifted to the far end of the balcony to give us privacy. Kyle moved closer, taking my hand in his and giving it a reassuring squeeze. Everybody makes mistakes, he said quietly. I'm not saying what Nate did was right, but everyone knows he cares about you. You're the only one who can't see it. If he lied, I'm sure he had a reason. His words didn't make me feel much better, but I nodded anyway. Kyle smiled, trying to lift my spirits. Still, the truth echoed in my mind. Nathan didn't owe me anything. He'd been clear from the start, what we had wasn't supposed to be more. I was the fool who wanted it to grow into something else. Maybe it was time to stop wishing for more, to stop clinging to a dream. Maybe it was time to accept reality. I turned back to the view, but the ache in my chest lingered. John's POV. They'd been gone a long while, almost 45 minutes, and Nathan was on edge. Normally he could hide his emotions well, but lately when it came to Riley, he was a completely different person. It bothered me how much control the kid seemed to have over him. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't normal. And it was making Nate weaker. I glanced at the exit again, frowning. Almost an hour. In a few minutes, we'd be escorted back to our cells, and there was still no sign of Kyle or Riley. I didn't trust that guard, and I could only hope Kyle hadn't said something reckless that would land him in trouble I couldn't pull him out of. The kid had a sharp tongue, and one day it might cost him dearly. I drummed my fingers on the desk, half listening to the others while waiting for Kyle to return. I wouldn't admit it out loud, but I was worried. Not because I was attached, but because the agent in me always had the instinct to protect. And Kyle, more than anyone else, seemed to need it. He does something foolish, Nate muttered. You lied to him, I said flatly. And Riley's always been emotional. If he's upset, I wouldn't be surprised. Nate's jaw tightened. He looked even more restless. The buzzer finally sounded, signaling it was time to return to our cells. I glanced once more at the exit, still no Kyle, and allowed myself to be ushered out with the others. Riley's POV. By the time I returned to the cell later that night, Nathan was tossing his ball against the wall. As soon as I stepped in, he straightened up on his bunk, leaning back against the wall as his eyes followed me. I didn't meet his gaze. I silently removed my boots and shirt, then sat at the desk in just my boxers. Taking a deep breath, I settled into the chair. I'd already made my decision on that balcony. No more chasing after something that wasn't real. No more pretending this was a relationship when it wasn't. Nathan had been clear from the beginning, and it was time I finally accepted it. I still needed him, I probably always would, but from now on, I had to stop wishing for more. Where have you been? He finally asked, breaking the silence. His tone almost sounded like a parent scolding a child for staying out too late. I rolled my eyes. He was worried, that much I knew. But I also knew better than to expect more than concern from him. His heart was like stone. Getting wasted at a college party? I replied sarcastically. He narrowed his eyes. I sighed. Relax. I've been here the whole time. His expression didn't change. He still wore that hardened look, and for once, I didn't bother to ease it. Anything else you want to know? I asked coolly. Stop playing games, Riley. It was a simple question. Yeah, and the answer's none of your business, I shot back, frustration building. You can't just run off with some guard. These people aren't your friends, Riley, you could get hurt. Would you stop treating me like a child for once? I snapped, jumping up from the chair and storming toward the metal bars. I wrapped my fingers together and squeezed, trying to calm the anger rising inside me. Is there a reason you can't tell me where you went with him? Nathan asked. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed fixed on the empty corridor, but the silence between us grew heavier by the second. I just hope you remember our deal. If you cross that line, it's over. I spun around to face him, my voice sharp with hurt. So that's what I am to you? Someone you don't trust? You really think so little of me? I'm only trying to protect you, he shot back. You're acting reckless. You need to take this seriously. He threw the ball in his hand against the wall, and it bounced past me through the bars. I drew a deep breath, my chest tight. You're right about one thing. I do need to grow up. I'm sick of all this. I let my hands drop and slid down the cold wall to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I whispered, he just took us to a balcony. We stood there, looked at the view, and then he brought us back. That's it. A guard's voice rang out, lights out. The room plunged into darkness. For a long moment there was nothing. Then Nathan's voice, softer this time, I shouldn't have said. It's fine, I cut him off. Hours later, I lay awake staring into the dark. Sleep refused to come. My thoughts circled endlessly, dragging me deeper into frustration. I rolled to my side, listening to the silence, wishing I had even a sliver of light to distract myself with a book. Instead, I tried to focus on lighter things, like Christmas coming soon. Kyle and I had signed up to help decorate the cafeteria. Not that most people here would care. For many, it would only be a reminder of what they were missing: family, freedom, and the warmth of home. A soft sound broke the silence. I turned and saw Nathan standing beside my bunk. What are you? I'm sorry, he said simply. I acted badly earlier. I shrugged. It's fine. Really. I'm over it. He didn't move. A moment later, the mattress dipped as he sat down beside me. My chest tightened, conflicted by the familiar pull of his presence. This, his closeness, his quiet care, was what made everything harder. My mind reminded me that it was just physical between us, nothing more. But my heart betrayed me with the hope that it could mean something deeper. Nathan's hand brushed my cheek, gentle in a way that nearly broke me. My heartbeat thundered. I pulled his hand away, swallowing down the storm of emotions. Don't, I whispered, my voice rough. He looked surprised, but he didn't argue. For a while we just sat there, caught between silence and words unsaid. Then he leaned closer, his presence overwhelming. I wanted to give in, to let the comfort take over, but I forced myself to stay firm. Can we not do this tonight? I asked quietly. I just want to sleep. He hesitated, then nodded. All right. He shifted as if to stay beside me anyway, but I shook my head. Please. Just, your bunk's over there. Nathan froze, clearly taken aback, but after a beat he pulled away. I felt the cold air fill the space where he had been. My throat ached, and I bit down on my lip to stop it from trembling. He stood there for a moment, as if uncertain, before finally climbing back to his bunk. I buried myself beneath the covers, holding back the sob that threatened to escape. I knew the truth. I needed to stop hoping for more. A real relationship wasn't going to happen between us. Still, the thought cut deep. Nathan's POV. As much as I hated to admit it, I felt used. Chapter 20. Nathan's POV. I didn't wake to the usual warmth of Riley curled against me. Instead, I opened my eyes to find the space beside me empty. My brows furrowed. Riles? I called softly, surprised to hear his voice come from below. Leaning over the edge of my bunk, I spotted him sitting cross-legged on the chair, his face buried in a book. What are you doing? Come here, I said, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Reading, he replied, his tone distant. The memory of the night before came rushing back, and I clenched my jaw. You're not starting this again, are you? I asked. He said nothing. If he wanted to play the silent game, I wasn't going to push. I dropped from the bunk and pulled on my clothes. Riley didn't even glance up from his book. A flicker of annoyance passed through me, but I shoved it down and sat on his rumpled sheets, waiting for the guards to unlock the doors. The silence stretched for 20 minutes until the buzzer sounded. He ignored me through the walk to the showers, then all the way to the cafeteria. And when I sat in my usual spot, he surprised me by taking a seat next to Kyle and John instead of beside me. Everyone at the table noticed. Well, this is new, John commented, glancing between us. Mind your own business, Johnny, Kyle shot back. A few of the guys chuckled at the exchange, though John only gave him a pointed look. Kyle leaned close to John with a grin. You need to shave. We all watched with varying degrees of amusement as John swatted his hand away, grumbling. What's up with you two? Someone nudged Riley. Riley rolled his eyes and answered flatly, Trust me, it's not about love. The table laughed, tossing a few jokes my way. I didn't rise to them, though my eyes settled on Riley. He didn't even look at me, just kept listening to whatever Kyle was saying. Trying to redirect, I turned to Eddie. Any news? Nothing on Riley's situation, he said. But as for our case, everything's on track. We'll be out before you know it. His grin showed his excitement. He had someone waiting for him outside. Most of the team had already decided this would be their last undercover job. I couldn't blame them, the risks were high, and it had cost us all too much. But for me, this was the life I'd trained for. This wouldn't be my last mission. Still, I couldn't deny the ache in my chest when I thought about the few short weeks I had left with Riley. What do you want for Christmas? Kyle's voice cut into my thoughts as he turned to John. We're in prison, John replied simply, biting into his bread. That's not what I asked. Eat your food, John muttered. Kyle pouted. You know, that attitude will get you nowhere. Wanna hear what I want for Christmas? No. Undeterred, Kyle leaned his head against John's shoulder. John sighed in frustration. Kyle, I'm trying to eat. Riley finally spoke up. Kyle and I are helping decorate the cafeteria. Any of you want to join? The silence that followed was answer enough. Come on, wouldn't you like to see something different for a change? He tried again. Still nothing. What about you, Nate? Want to help decorate? Riley asked at last. I shook my head. I'll pass. He sighed and John murmured, not the best way to get back on his good side. I'm not trying to get back on anyone's good side, I muttered. Before the conversation could continue, shouting erupted across the cafeteria. Guards rushed from their posts as fists flew and a loud crack echoed through the room. Someone's jaw had been broken. Great. Lockdown, John grumbled. Exactly what we didn't need. Lockdown would stall our carefully timed plans, and the deadline was already closing in. Beans again. Why am I not surprised? Riley muttered from his seat, still trying to peer over the chaos. Get down, Riley. You're drawing attention, I warned. Reluctantly, he lowered himself back, though he continued to crane his neck for a better look. This is getting serious, Eddie said grimly. We'll be stuck for at least a week, John added, his tone tight. A week of lockdown? Kyle exclaimed. I can't stay in my cell with the old man that long. He'll drive me crazy. Nathan's POV. Guys, I might be wrong, but I think a guard just got stabbed, Riley said in a horrified voice. I pushed up from my seat and moved closer to the growing crowd. The cafeteria was in complete chaos, food trays flying through the air, men shouting and running, guards trying to restrain inmates who refused to listen. I knew it was only a matter of time before tear gas was unleashed. I ducked when a tray whizzed past my head and shattered against the wall behind me. Get down, one of the guards yelled. Someone slammed into me and I stumbled. When I straightened, I caught sight of a guard with his weapon raised, ready to fire. My chest tightened. I dove back toward my table, sliding across the floor. Down now, I shouted, grabbing Riley and pulling him to the ground. I half covered him with my body, shielding his head as best I could. The others followed suit, dropping low just in time. Seconds later, the cracks of gunfire rang out, and I knew without looking that some people had been hit. Oh my goodness, Riley whispered frantically beneath me, his body trembling. Eddie's been hit. John's voice cut through the noise. I looked up and saw him crossing the room, head still low, to reach our fallen comrade. I pushed off the floor. Stay down, I told Riley firmly before rushing toward them. John had his hand pressed to Eddie's chest, blood spreading fast. It's bad, he muttered. I dropped to my knees beside him, panic threatening to choke me. Get help! John barked, shoving me toward the guards. I jumped to my feet, But before I could make it far, a wave of heat slammed into me. The world tilted violently as I was flung backward. I hit the wall hard and crumpled to the ground. Darkness swept in before I even realized what had happened. When I woke, my head throbbed painfully. The air was filled with shouting, pounding footsteps, and unbearable heat. Groaning, I forced myself upright, testing my arms and legs to make sure I could still move. What? My words cut short when I saw it. The cafeteria wall across from me was almost entirely blown apart. Flames raged near the opening, devouring everything in their path as inmates and guards scrambled in chaos. I stumbled forward, nearly tripping over a body on the floor. "What is happening?" I muttered, but a voice answered beside me. "They blew it up." John grabbed my arm, pulling me upright. His face was streaked with sweat and soot. "What?" I gasped. "The fighting. It was all a distraction. They're escaping." His words hit me like ice water, and my eyes widened. "Come on, help me find the others," he urged, dragging me toward the flames. "Eddie, where's Eddie?" I asked, grabbing his sleeve. His handprint, bloody and smeared, marked my arm. His eyes flickered, unreadable. "Later. We don't have time." He ran, weaving past rubble and desperate men, and I forced myself to follow, even as pain throbbed in my skull. Then I spotted Riley. He stood amid the wreckage, pale and sweating, blood staining his pants. His teeth dug into his lip as he stared between the gaping hole in the wall and the chaos behind him. "Riley, don't!" Kyle shouted, standing nearby, his voice desperate. I ran closer. Riley's eyes met mine for a brief moment, wide with panic, before he quickly shuttered his expression. "Riley," I began, but Kyle cut me off, spinning toward me. "Nate, do something. He's going to run." Riley edged closer to the hole. Around us, guards struggled to contain the flames and round up prisoners, too distracted to notice him. "Riley, don't!" I pleaded, stepping carefully, afraid to push him over the edge. My heart raced. "I have to," he shouted back. His voice broke, fear etched on his face. I took another step forward. "No, you don't. If you do this, you'll be on the run. And when they catch you, that's it, Riles? Your life will be over. Please come here." I tried to sound calm, even though my chest was tight with dread. He glanced between me and Kyle, then his face hardened. "My life is already over," he said, voice firm. Before I could stop him, he turned and bolted through the opening. "Riley, no!" Kyle screamed, then sprinted after him. "Kyle!" John swore and ran straight into the hole behind them both. I stood frozen for a moment, my head spinning, before instinct finally kicked in. I darted forward, leaping over rubble and forcing my way through the jagged opening. On the other side was a tunnel, dimly lit, its walls crumbling. Debris littered the floor. Ahead, I could hear Kyle shouting Riley's name, his voice echoing. I ran faster, ignoring the sounds of gunfire and shouts behind me, focusing only on catching up. My feet pounded against the stone, every breath burning in my chest. And then, fresh air. I stumbled out into the open night, lungs dragging in oxygen greedily. The escape route had been carefully planned, straight, clear, and shockingly efficient. Guards rushed about, shouts and shots echoing through the darkness, but I didn't stop. I fixed my eyes on John's figure ahead and pushed forward. When I reached the fence, I squeezed through a jagged gap, tearing my clothes but breaking free. Beyond it lay the dark stretch of asphalt and the forest waiting just ahead. I sprinted into the trees, branches whipping past me, roots clawing at my boots. My heart hammered as I realized the truth. By stepping through that hole, we hadn't just escaped the prison. We had become fugitives. Chapter 21. Riley's POV. Kyle's shouts had faded some time ago. Now, the only sound I heard was the pounding of his footsteps echoing through the dense, green terrain behind me. I darted through the woodland as fast as my legs would carry me, refusing to look back, refusing to stop. I couldn't be caught. I couldn't go back there. My foot slipped in the mud, nearly sending me sprawling, but I managed to right myself and kept running. My heart hammered in my chest, and every breath came in short, painful gasps. A sharp stitch twisted at my side, reminding me of all those times I had chosen reading over working out with the others. Right now, it wasn't my books that could save me, it was the strength of my body. I pressed a hand against my side, branches slapping across my arms as I pushed forward. Distance. That was all I needed, distance from the prison. I didn't let myself think about what came after. I didn't think about Kyle, who had been reckless enough to follow me, or Nate, who was still back there. I just kept running. Freedom was my goal. I had to make it. John's POV. Though the longer I chased after him, the more I wondered who the bigger fool really was, him or me. I ducked beneath a low branch, breath heavy, until finally I spotted him. Kyle sat slumped against the roots of a tree, trying to catch his breath. Anger flared in my chest. I strode over and yanked him up by the collar. "Have you lost your mind?" I snapped, giving him a shake until he sagged against me, grabbing my arms to steady himself. "Johnny?" he breathed, eyes wide with disbelief. Then, before I could react, his arms locked around my neck. "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're here." His voice cracked with relief. For a split second, I almost hugged him back, but I forced myself to pry his arms away. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? That's years added to your sentence." I exploded. His face fell, shame flickering in his expression. "I know. I couldn't let Riley go alone." His voice trailed off as if some new thought struck him. Slowly, his brows furrowed, then, to my annoyance, his face broke into a grin. "You came after me," he squealed, throwing his arms around me again. "I knew you cared." I shoved him back, heat creeping uncomfortably down my spine. "Kyle, listen to me," I ordered. But his face still glowed with that same goofy smile, as though he didn't grasp how serious this was. "When they realize you're missing, your face will be plastered everywhere. They'll hunt you down, and when they catch you, you'll be locked away for years. Do you understand me?" I said slowly, firmly. This time, his smile faltered. His eyes widened. I didn't think. Riley just ran, and I couldn't let him go alone. His words tumbled over each other, panic bleeding through. I tuned him out briefly, listening for the sounds around us. In the distance, I could already hear the faint wail of the prison alarms. Any moment now, the forest would be crawling with search teams and dogs. "And you actually followed me. You risked everything too." "I'm so sorry," Kyle murmured, his voice breaking, but I shook my head. "You need to turn yourself in," I said sharply. "You might still get a lighter sentence." "No way," he cut me off, arms folding stubbornly across his chest. I stared at him. "You can't be serious." "I'm not leaving until I find Riley," he declared. I took a long, steady breath, fighting the urge to snap. "Listen, you've already ruined things for yourself, and for me. Either you walk back with me, or I'll drag you there myself." He glared. "If you do that, I'll never forgive you." "I can live with that," I muttered, stepping closer. His bravado cracked then, replaced with genuine worry. "Please, John. I can't leave Riley out here. What if he's hurt? Just help me find him first, then we'll go back." His voice broke, tears welling in his eyes. I froze, staring at him. With a hard swallow, I grabbed his arm. "We're going back. Riley made his choice. If he knows what's good for him, he'll turn himself in." I tugged him along, his body resisting every step. I was just about to haul him over my shoulder when the sound of snapping twigs reached my ears. A moment later, Nate came tearing through the trees, wild-eyed and frantic. He skidded to a halt when he saw us. "Where is he?" he demanded. "Nate." Kyle gasped, relief flooding his face. "What are you doing out here?" If possible, the day had just gone from bad to worse. Our case was already in ruins, and now with Nate out here too, there would be no undoing this mess. "Where's Riley?" Nate pressed again, eyes burning with determination. I clenched my jaw. Of course. Why else would he risk everything? "Riley. I only managed to find this one." I lifted Kyle's arm, though he struggled to pull away. "He went that way," Kyle blurted, pointing into the trees. Nate's gaze followed the direction, then snapped back to me, his jaw set. "Take Kyle back. I'll get Riley." Before I could argue, he was gone, racing through the forest, desperate to find the one person who might not want to be found. John's POV. "I can't believe he came for him," Kyle whispered, his voice filled with awe. I glanced down at him, then looked back toward the path Nate had taken. My priority was to get Kyle back before the alarms spread further, but my best friend, my partner since childhood, was out there in the woods, searching desperately for his cellmate. That same cellmate was determined to escape, regardless of the consequences. I could leave Nate to it, take Kyle back, and hope it all worked out. Or I could follow and make sure he didn't need my help. I looked toward the prison, then back into the forest. Nate hadn't had a clear thought since Riley entered his life, and if I left him in this maze of trees, who knew what might happen? With a heavy sigh, I let go of Kyle's arm. He blinked up at me in confusion. "Come on," I muttered, then pushed forward, darting into the trees after Nate. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let my friend face it alone. Riley's POV. When running became too much, I slowed to a jog until I finally had no choice but to stop. I dropped behind the trunk of a massive tree, gasping for air. My throat was dry, my hands shook, and my chest burned. I couldn't tell how long I had been running. It felt like hours. I leaned back against the rough bark and looked up at the dull gray sky. The sun was hidden, and the cold crept deeper into my bones. Pulling my knees to my chest, I forced myself to steady my breathing so I could listen for sounds around me. Kyle's footsteps had faded long ago. I had lost him, and now worry gnawed at me. Had he fallen? Was he hurt? Why had he followed me in the first place? I hadn't thought beyond escape. Sitting there, trembling, I realized just how unprepared I was. Where would I go? How would I survive without money, shelter, or help? I couldn't risk reaching out to Jerry, my closest friend, because the authorities would be watching him. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe I had been reckless. If I was caught, Nate had been right. My future would be over. But then I pushed the thought away. My life had already been over the moment I was convicted. Staying in prison meant giving up. Escaping meant fighting back, no matter the cost. I promised myself I would clear my name. If it took months or even years, I would find a way. I would not go back. As my legs cramped, I stretched them out and stared at my shoes, my thoughts drifting to Nate. What was he thinking right now? Was he angry? Worried? I pictured him sitting on his bunk, looking at the empty bed across from his, and my chest tightened. The thought of him made my heart ache, and tears stung my eyes. But I forced them down. Now was not the time to be weak. Later, when I was safe, I would let myself think of him again. I stood, brushed dirt from my palms, and listened. Only the whisper of the wind and the distant sounds of the forest met my ears. No pursuit, at least not yet. I turned forward and began moving again. I stumbled several times, once hard enough to scrape my knee, but I didn't stop. When at last I found a river, I dropped to my knees and drank deeply, the icy water burning my throat before easing it. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by tears. I cried for my family, for Kyle, for Nate, and for myself. Fear and exhaustion spilled out with every sob. Between breaths, I whispered promises to whatever higher power might be listening. That if I survived this, I would become better. I would mend things with my mom, go to school, work hard, and stop wasting chances. When the tears finally ended, I splashed my face with water and pushed forward. The river was shallow, so I waded across, my steps unsteady but determined. On the other side, the forest began to thin, making it easier to move. I jogged as much as I could, stopping only briefly to catch my breath. But when I tripped again, falling hard enough to knock the wind out of me, a chilling thought struck. If I broke something now, I would be done. And then, panic rose in me for another reason. What if Kyle had been hurt somewhere back there, injured, alone, and terrified? I hadn't heard him for hours. He should have caught up by now. My chest tightened with guilt. Kyle had cared enough to chase after me. He had been my friend, one of the few bright spots in that place. And I had ignored him, left him behind. If something happened to him because of me, I would never forgive myself. I bit my lip, glanced behind me, and made a choice. I turned back. Kyle was worth the risk. Chapter 22. Riley's POV. I couldn't tell how long I had been running, but I knew this much. I was cold, my feet ached, my clothes were torn, and scratches and bruises covered places I didn't even know could hurt. My knee was skinned, my pants were ripped, and I was dirtier than I had ever been in my life. On top of all that, hunger gnawed at my stomach, and my throat felt like sandpaper. Each step only fueled my worry for Kyle. If I was in this bad of a state, then how much worse off could he be? Tears threatened every time I thought about him, but I pushed them back. I couldn't lose focus. I had to find my way back, and I couldn't risk taking a wrong turn or missing him entirely if he hadn't already gotten lost himself. By now I was half running, half walking, the stitch in my side forcing me to slow. I had just sidestepped a route when a loud siren broke through the air. It wasn't deafening, but clear enough that it echoed through the forest. Another prison alert. I had heard several since my escape, and I had no idea what this one meant. Still, the sound only tightened the knot of fear in my chest. Just when exhaustion threatened to pull me to the ground, I saw a figure rushing through the trees. Too tall to be Kyle. Panic surged, and before I could think, I spun on my heels and bolted. My heart pounded in my throat. Was this it? Was I about to be caught, dragged back to that cell I swore I would never see again? Something heavy slammed into me from behind, knocking me hard onto my chest. Warm breath hit the back of my neck, and I kicked and clawed at the ground, fighting desperately to escape. I screamed, twisted, and tried to crawl away, but a strong hand clamped over my mouth, silencing me. My lungs burned as I struggled for air, and panic blurred my thoughts. I bit down on the hand as hard as I could, and with a sharp groan, it pulled away. "Help!" I shouted into the forest. "Help!" I jabbed my elbows backward, hoping to land a hit. "Will you calm down for just 1 second?" A familiar voice growled above me. I froze. I knew that voice. The pressure eased and I rolled onto my back. My breath caught when I saw him. For a moment I thought I was imagining him, hallucinating from exhaustion and hunger. But no, he was really there, standing over me, looking every bit as frustrated as I had ever seen him. "Nate?" I whispered, staring in disbelief. He reached down, grabbed my arm, and pulled me to my feet. "Are you all right?" he asked. It took him asking again before I managed to nod. "I'm fine. I don't understand." Before I could finish, he tugged me forward, pulling me along through the trees. "They've sounded the alarm. They'll be out looking for us already." "I need to find Kyle," I blurted out, panic slipping into my voice. "He followed me. He might be hurt. What if they find him first?" "He's fine," Nate said evenly. "He's with John." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No, you don't understand. He ran after me. I lost him. I don't know where he is." "I do," Nate said firmly. He stopped and looked at me then, his expression unreadable. "He's with John. I passed them earlier. They're on their way back." "John's here too." My voice cracked in confusion. "But what's going on? None of this makes sense." Nate paused, his jaw tight. "What part doesn't make sense, Riley? You ran. Kyle followed you. John went after him. And I came to bring you back. Now all of us are tangled in this because of your decision." His words hit like a stone in my chest. "So, we're all fugitives now?" Horror sank into me. I never meant for this. I had to go. I couldn't stay there. When his words finally sank in, I pulled my arm free. "Wait, you said bring me back?" "I'm not going back." Nate sighed, dragging a hand over his face. He leaned against a tree, looking exhausted. His clothes were torn, his cheeks smudged with dirt, and there was dried blood near his hairline. He looked worn, but his voice was steady when he spoke again. "The trouble we're in is worse than you realize. You escaped, Riley. The only chance we have left is to turn ourselves in and hope we can deal with the consequences." I opened my mouth to protest, but he lifted a hand to silence me. Believe it or not, nobody in that prison wants to be there. But there's a reason most stayed put when you ran. They knew the risks. "I'm telling you, we need to go back." This isn't a game. I swallowed hard, unable to find an answer. Before I could speak, a familiar voice shouted my name. Moments later, Kyle and John burst through the trees. Kyle threw himself at me, arms tight around my neck. Thank God, he whispered over and over. Relief swept over me so strongly my knees nearly gave out. Kyle was safe. For now, at least, we were together again. Riley's POV. He finally pulled away and looked me over with a wide smile. You have no idea how worried I've been, he exclaimed before pulling me into another hug. He was acting more like a worried parent than a friend, but I didn't care. I was simply too happy to see him safe. Thought you were taking him back? I overheard Nathan mutter to John. I glanced toward them, but as soon as they noticed me listening, their voices dropped. All I could make out now was Kyle's constant chatter and the faint sound of alarms echoing from the prison. Actually came looking for me and Nate came for you too. Isn't that amazing? They must really care about us, Kyle said dreamily. I nodded absent-mindedly, my thoughts elsewhere. If John had run after Kyle, it made sense why Nate was here too. John was his best friend after all. But deep down, I knew Nate wasn't just here for him. He was here for me too. Nate always felt responsible for those around him, always ready to protect. That was simply who he was. And no matter what the reason, I couldn't deny how relieved I was to see him, and to know that none of us were alone anymore. I squeezed Kyle's hand, and he gave me a reassuring smile. All right, let's move, Nate said, his tone sharp with purpose. John immediately guided Kyle toward the prison, but I stepped back, holding out my hands to stop Nate. I'm not going back, I said firmly. Nate's expression didn't change. He kept walking toward me until I found myself pressed against a tree, his presence towering over me. Riley, we don't have time for this. They're searching for us right now. Our best chance is to show that we're turning ourselves in and cooperate. You don't understand, Nate. I cut him off, my voice trembling with desperation. You might survive that place, but it's destroying me. It's only a matter of time before I lose myself completely. I can't go back. He frowned but stayed calm. You can talk to the prison counselor. It could help. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just need to solve my case and move on with my life. His patience was thinning. How do you expect to solve a case when even the police couldn't? Riley, you're chasing something impossible. He grabbed my arm to pull me along, but when I met his eyes, something in my expression made him stop. I'd rather die than go back, I whispered with unwavering conviction. If you try to force me, I'll end it myself. Silence fell. John's voice finally broke it. Then they'll just put him on watch, Nate. We need to leave. I shook my head. You can't stop someone who's already made up their mind. Let me go, Nate. I can do this. I can solve my case and be free. But no matter what, I'm not going back. For a moment, I thought he'd drag me anyway. But then, something shifted in his expression. Disappointment? Frustration? Maybe both. So he stepped back. For the first time, I felt like I had taken control of my own life. You all should go back, I said softly. I'm sorry for the trouble, but I'll be fine. I promise. I tried to smile, though it felt hollow. Nate glared at me. You think solving your case will fix everything? Life doesn't work that way. Maybe not, I admitted, but it's worth trying. He looked between me and John, his jaw tightening. Finally, he turned to his best friend. John, take Kyle back. I frowned, uncertain what he meant. John's eyes widened. Don't tell me you're actually going to do this. I'll help Riley, Nate said firmly. If it doesn't work out, then we'll deal with the consequences. My heart leapt with hope. John looked torn. Nate, everything we've worked for. I know, Nate cut him off. His voice was harsh but steady. But he'll get himself killed out here alone. Just take Kyle back. I'll handle the rest. John stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing every unspoken word between them. At last, he released Kyle's arm. You might need backup, he muttered, though his tone held no enthusiasm. I can't ask you to risk that, Nate replied. If this goes wrong, it's over for us. Good thing you didn't ask, John said firmly. If we're going to have any chance of solving this, we need to move now. Realization struck me, John was coming too. Expression grave, Nate gripped John's shoulder, and John gave a silent nod in return. If we wait until nightfall, they'll block every road, John explained. We need to leave within the next couple of hours. Then let's go, Nate said. When they began down an unfamiliar path, I quickly spoke up. Wait, there's a river that way. Once we cross it, the trees thin out on the other side. It means we're close to the edge of the forest. Nate gave a brief nod, and we all moved in that direction. He took the lead, John guarded the rear, and Kyle and I ran side by side in between. It all felt unreal, as if at any moment I'd wake up back in my prison cell. But the more I ran, the more I felt alive. With Kyle beside me and Nate and John determined to help, I finally believed I could do this. We traveled with steady discipline, resting every 45 minutes for only 10 before moving again at a runner's pace. I fell behind more than once, but John's encouragement kept me moving forward. Crossing the river gave us hope, but it left us cold and exhausted. At one point, Kyle asked if the water would throw off any tracking dogs. Nate, sounding tired, answered, "It doesn't work like that," and that ended the conversation. The forest thinned after the river, and soon we could see its edge. Nate slowed us down to a walk, motioning for silence while he and John scouted ahead. Beyond the trees stretched an open field, and in the distance stood a small farmhouse with a weathered barn. Crossing the open space was terrifying. Every second, I expected searchlights or a helicopter to descend on us. The moment we reached the barn and slipped behind its worn frame, I could finally breathe again. Nate quickly checked the area before signaling us inside. Quietly, we entered the old structure, grateful for a moment of shelter while they figured out our next move. As we sat there catching our breath, I couldn't help but wonder if I would have made it this far on my own. Looking back on the journey, I hadn't been very optimistic about our chances. Kyle stretched his legs out, half leaning on John, who was quietly discussing the next move with Nathan. I sat as far away from Nate as possible, which was probably wise. Since the start of our journey, he hadn't once looked my way, and whenever I managed to catch a glimpse of his face, he looked as though he'd just bitten into something unbearably sour. He didn't want to be here, that much was clear. Still, as selfish as it sounded, I was glad he was. We're not far from the main road. I can hear car horns, Kyle announced. Hey, look, it looks like clothes, I exclaimed, pushing myself up to examine scraps of fabric hanging from a rusted nail in the corner. On closer inspection, no one could really call it clothes. It was filthy and torn, more like work rags than anything useful. Probably something the landowner had once worn while farming. Still, I held it up for the others to see. Look around, see if you can find more, Nate said, and even he started searching. In the end, there was only that one piece. It was so small it would only fit me or Kyle. I handed it to Kyle, who took it reluctantly. Put it on over your clothes. It's too cold to strip down, Nate instructed. We followed his lead. Once I had it over my head, I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from gagging at the smell of dried sweat and something else I couldn't identify. All right, we're going to check the area. Find somewhere to hide and stay covered. If you hear anything, stay hidden. You'll know if it's us, John told us. We nodded quickly. Not long after, they were gone, and Kyle and I scrambled to find a hiding spot. The only option was under a muddy tarpaulin. We spread it flat as best as we could, hoping no one would notice two bodies hidden beneath it. Without John and Nate, we didn't dare speak, afraid someone might discover us. I could feel Kyle's heart pounding against my arm, and the sound of car horns echoed not far away. Time dragged on. My foot began to cramp, but I forced myself to stay still. I didn't know how long we waited, but when John and Nate finally returned, I was sore all over and more than ready to stretch. They looked exhausted, as though they'd been running. Kyle, give Riley the pants, Nate instructed. I frowned, confused, as Kyle removed the filthy garment and handed it to me. Hurry up and put it on. You're coming back out with me, Nate explained. I didn't question him. Instead, I slipped it over my prison-issued pants and followed him out, glancing back at Kyle, who gave me an encouraging smile. Soon, Nate and I were crouched low behind brush, sneaking past the farmhouse. "There's a town just up the road, that's where we're headed," Nate explained. I nodded. We moved carefully, crouching behind whatever cover we could find, sometimes running when the path was open. It didn't take long to reach the town. Compared to the city I grew up in, it looked worn down. The streets were quiet, and many buildings needed fresh paint. Old pickup trucks, mostly Chevys, lined the narrow streets. "See that sign?" Nate whispered, pointing from where we hid in an alley. I nodded. "That's the name of this town. Memorize it." Then he pointed again, this time across the street. A red Chevy sat parked, and beside it, an older man was loading a small box into the truck bed while talking with another. When John and I came earlier, we overheard him saying he's headed to Clevestock, 2 towns over. "I know a guy about an hour and a half outside town. His name's Ringo, and he owes me a favor," Nate explained. "He turned to me. I need you to get a ride with that man. Have him drop you in Scotts Grove at a motel called Bob's Rest Stop. From there, walk 3 blocks, turn right at the garage with rusted junk out front. Go around back and ask for Ringo. Tell him Nate sent you and that it's time to repay that favor." The more Nate explained, the more nervous I became. "He'll want proof," Nate continued. "Tell him he knows me from Reno. Ask for clothes, then have him bring his truck here to pick us up. Got that?" I nodded quickly. "But what if Ringo isn't there?" I asked. Nate gripped my shoulder firmly. "Listen, Riley. This is our only shot. Say whatever you have to say to get into that truck. Ringo will be there. By the time he comes back here, this town might be crawling with police. Stay at his shop until we arrive, you'll be safe." He glanced back at the Chevy owner, then at me. "I can't go dressed like this. It has to be you. If Ringo's not around, tell him I said to give you some money and a place to stay for a few days. I'll figure out the rest. Now go." He pushed me gently toward the street. My hands trembled as I shoved them into my pockets, nerves eating at me. Everything rested on this moment. I took a deep breath and approached the truck. The 2 men stopped talking and looked at me. "Hello, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Would you be willing to give me a ride to Scotts Grove? I'm supposed to meet my brother at Bob's Rest Stop." The man studied me for a moment, then pointed to the truck bed. "You can ride, but only in the back." Relief washed over me. "Thank you," I said, quickly climbing up onto the hard surface. Before we pulled away, I glanced back toward the alley. I couldn't see Nate, but I knew he was watching. I whispered a silent prayer that everything would go according to plan. The ride felt endless. Every bump in the road made me more anxious. What if Ringo wasn't there? What if Nate and the others got caught? My mind spiraled with possibilities. By the time the man dropped me at Bob's Rest Stop without so much as a wave, I was back to feeling nervous all over again. I waited until his truck disappeared, then turned up the road. Keeping my head down, I walked quickly, searching for the garage with rusted junk out front. This was it, the moment everything depended on. 2.5 blocks later, I found myself standing face to face with Ringo, stumbling through the explanation Nathan had given me. Ringo wasn't exactly the welcoming type. As I spoke, he looked more irritated than anything else, annoyed at the interruption and even more annoyed that he'd have to leave his cluttered little garage to help someone out. He made me wait outside while he gathered some clothes. They were large enough to fit Nate and John but far too big for Kyle, unless he didn't mind looking like he was draped in bedsheets. I didn't tell Ringo that Nate had instructed me to stay behind, because I didn't trust him to handle things properly. Something told me he'd drive into town, not see them right away, and leave before giving it a real chance. I couldn't risk that. I climbed into the front seat of Ringo's truck, only for him to give me a sharp look and point to the back. "There's a hidden compartment back there. If I see cops, that's where you'll go," he explained. I nodded quickly and slid into the back. It didn't take long to get back to town, mostly because Ringo drove like a man who had no concern for speed limits. My head kept bumping the window, and I was sure I'd leave with more than just a sore neck. We arrived in just over an hour, and as Nate had predicted, police lights flashed ahead. Several patrol cars lined the streets. Without being told, I slipped into the hidden compartment. It wasn't exactly cramped, but it was dark and the sharp metal edges pressed into me uncomfortably. From the faint smell, I guessed Ringo had used it before to hide things that definitely weren't legal. The truck slowed. My pulse quickened. A voice I didn't recognize spoke to Ringo. It was a police officer. I held my breath as I listened. Just picking up supplies at the hardware store. No, I don't live around here. No idea about a prison escape. Really? How'd that happen? No, I don't recognize anyone in that picture. Yes, I understand I'll be searched on the way out. Finally, thank you, officer. We moved again, and I heard Ringo muttering to himself, complaining about not wanting to get in trouble for someone else's problems. He stopped briefly, saying something about getting cement, then slammed the door. I stayed hidden, groaning inwardly. This was the last person Nate should have relied on. I listened to him load heavy bags into the truck bed. 10 minutes later, he climbed back in. Now where am I supposed to find them? He asked himself. There's a farmhouse about a block down, I whispered from my hiding place. We drove closer, and sure enough, police officers were stationed at the farmhouse door, speaking with a woman while others searched around the back. My heart pounded and my mouth went dry. They'll search every yard nearby, Ringo muttered. Places this close to a prison are bound to have escapees hiding out. He turned the truck around, heading away. What are you doing? We can't just leave them. I exclaimed. Listen, kid. Stay quiet. I'm not going to jail for anyone, no matter what Nate thinks he did for me back in Reno, he snapped. Cold fear spread through me. This couldn't be happening. I tucked myself back into the compartment, my eyes stinging with tears. 15 minutes later, I heard him laugh. Lucky break, he muttered. I peeked out just in time to see figures bursting out of a bush near a trail. Nate, John, and Kyle. Relief flooded me. Moments later, the truck door flew open and Kyle was shoved inside. Into the compartment, Ringo ordered. I shifted to make room, and Kyle squeezed in beside me. Oh my gosh, Kyle. I thought they caught you. I whispered, tears spilling. They almost did. John suggested we move closer to the border just in time, Kyle explained. The door slammed again. This time, I understood why Ringo had bought cement. The others were climbing into the truck bed, using the bags as cover. Before we set off, Ringo made me push the seat back into place, leaving Kyle and me in total darkness. Soon, the truck stopped again. I heard voices, a flashlight beam swept briefly across the crack in the seat, and heavy bags of cement were shifted. My heart nearly stopped. But then we were moving again. You can come out now, Ringo finally said. Kyle and I climbed out, and when I glanced back, I saw a van arriving with police dogs. My stomach tightened. A few minutes earlier and we would have been caught for sure. Hours later, freshly showered and wearing oversized clothes, Kyle and I sat on a cushionless couch in Ringo's garage, devouring slices of pizza that tasted like the best meal I'd ever had. Across the room, John and Nate spoke quietly with Ringo. I watched as Ringo handed them each a wad of cash before leaving, his truck rumbling to life moments later. You two should get some sleep. We're leaving at dawn, John told us. After everything that had happened, we didn't argue. We went to the small back room with a narrow bed and a desk piled high with tools. Kyle stretched out with a satisfied sigh, and I lay down beside him. From our spot, we could still see into the other room where John and Nate sat talking. Hard to believe we were in our cells just this morning, Kyle murmured. I nodded silently, my throat tight with unshed tears. After a moment, he asked, Do you think we'd still be lost in the forest if John and Nate hadn't shown up, or would we already be caught? I shrugged, unable to answer. Riley, are you okay? Kyle asked softly. It took a moment, but I shook my head. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice breaking. He wrapped an arm around me. So much, but you know what? We'll be all right. John and Nate won't let anything happen to us. You know that, right? I blinked back tears, but my heart still ached. Nate doesn't want to be here, I whispered. He hadn't said a word to me since this all began, and I couldn't shake the thought that he regretted helping. If he didn't want to be here, he wouldn't be. Stop worrying. Everything will work out. You'll see, Kyle said, yawning as his grip loosened. We'll be fine. Moments later, he was asleep. I stayed awake longer, watching John and Nate in the other room, silently praying Kyle was right, that somehow, we'd all come through this safely. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.